Welcome to Extraterrestrial Reality. I have a new essay to share with you today, and this is from the retired electronics engineer who did a lot of work for the United States government, who I've talked about before on the show. And most recently, I did an episode where he offered a grim view of the alien presence on this planet, and now he has some final conclusions that he wants to share. Now, this person, of course, I've talked about him numerous times in the past. He's a retired electronics engineer. He did work for DARPA, the CIA, NASA, as well as several defense contractors. And he sent me an essay, I guess it was yesterday, and I talked to him on the phone again today, and he also sent me a revised version of the essay, and that's the one we're going to go through here today. And these are his final conclusions on what he thinks is going on with these beings. Of course, his focus is mainly on the grays and the praying mantis style aliens, the ones who seem prevalent in the alien abduction stories that we've heard over the decades. And what their purpose is, and also he talks about his conclusions on what he thinks is going on with the reverse engineering aspect as far as the federal government is concerned, and his belief that he doesn't believe that there's anything that they've accomplished in that. He has not seen anything to show him that they were able to successfully reverse engineer anything from any of the recovered craft. And basically, it's just some kind of a ruse, basically thrown out there, as according to this person, that takes the focus off the bigger concern. Why are they here? You hear people like Richard Dolan talk about it on his podcast a lot. You know, people wonder, why are these beings here? What are they doing? People see these craft flying around every day. Every day there's sightings of UFOs across the world. Somewhere in the world, someone's seeing a unidentified flying objects. I am certain that sometimes that they are just balloons. Sometimes they are just misidentifications of known aircraft. Sometimes they're hallucinations. Sometimes they're just someone making up a story. But sometimes there's something else. There's something extraordinary, something that is operated by beings that have way more technological prowess than the human race has. That's my belief, based on the things that I've seen in my life. So I know, as do many people, tens of thousands of people who have encountered UFOs up close, particularly up close cases when they see them up close, or the beings themselves, even more so. That's humanoid encounters is the, as far as I'm concerned, that's the pinnacle of this whole situation, the whole UFO problem. When people have encounters with the humanoids themselves, people like researchers like Preston Dennett. I talk about his channel a lot. Every week he has a new show on talking about multiple different UFO sightings, and sometimes he does a lot of shows just on humanoid encounters, and there are so many. And when you listen to his show, and he gives you stories, a lot of times a lot of us never even heard of them before. There's just so many things out there, so many reports over the years that have accumulated to this point. It's undeniable. But anyway, I want to get into this latest essay from this retired electronics engineer. Maybe someday he will reveal who he is to the rest of the world. But he is a real person, and I have checked out his background, like I've talked about before, and I've talked to him on the phone today, this afternoon, just before I sat down to do today's podcast. But anyway, without any further delay, here we go. His final conclusions. Okay, he states, evidence suggests that the creatures have established numerous bases in highly secure locations. For example, within offshore mountain ranges such as Puerto Rico and Santa Catalina Island. These are solid granite formations which rise steeply from the ocean floor to heights of several thousand feet above sea level. Yes, there has been many cases of sightings of these craft in and around the Catalina Islands. A lot of sightings over the decades. In fact, I was just talking about before, Preston Dennett, he's talked about sightings out in Catalina many times on his show. Anyway, continuing here, he says, we have a large number of reports of UFOs entering or leaving the ocean in the vicinity of such locations, and I believe that they're using underwater tunnels to access hollowed out areas within those natural granite formations. Well, to be quite honest with you, I don't know what they're doing or how they're doing it. I do believe that they are using the oceans of the world and other bodies of water for that matter as hiding places. Is that where they're living? I think they've been here for a long time. I don't know how long they've been here, but they've been here for a long time, at least since 1947. But I actually believe that they actually had there was an extraterrestrial presence here long before that. I believe that too. But I think that they showed up in force. It seems starting in 1947, and it could have been in response to the United States using atomic bomb technology. That's what could have been. That's what might have spurred the arrival of many more of these beings for whatever reason. Maybe they view this planet as their own and they're planning on taking it over, and it just takes them time to do that. And maybe we're in the way, and they want to make sure that we don't destroy this place before they do take it over. All of this is speculation. I'm not saying I agree with what this anonymous source I have is stating here, but all we could do is speculate, because nobody in the government wants to step forward and tell us the truth. So what are we left to think? We were left to think wild speculation. That's all we can do. And a lot of it sounds crazy, but at the same time, what else is it then? What's the answer then? What is the answer? Now, there are a lot of people out there that think that there are beings here just, they're just checking us out. They don't want to interfere, and that's why they keep their distance. That's why they're very secretive. But then there are other people like this person here, this anonymous source who we're talking about today, who believes that it could be for nefarious purposes. We just don't really know. We just don't know. Anyway, continuing here with the essay, he writes, based on the number of reports, it seems that the small scouts craft are the vehicles most frequently seen coming and going. These 30-foot vehicles contain a crew of 2 to 3 small greys who will hunt for an animal such as a cow or a human, which they murder for blood and mutilate by removing certain body parts. Well, I'm not sure if I agree with this. I mean, there's been reports of cattle mutilations over the decades, and we know that for a fact. I mean, there's the carcasses are left behind, right? So we know that they're doing that. And there's a lot of UFO sightings reported in the vicinity when these cattle mutilations occur many times. There's been lots of UFO reports many times in the vicinity of cattle mutilations. So I do believe that there's something going on with that. But I don't know about the human mutilations. I don't know if there's enough evidence for that. I just don't. I don't see it. I'm just not there yet. I don't. There's a lot of people who disappear throughout the years, and some people suspect that they were taken by extraterrestrials. And there are people sometimes, like for instance, there was a case from the 70s. A guy named Carl Higdon was abducted while he was out hunting, and they returned him, according to him, because he had a vasectomy and he was useless to them. I don't know. I mean, do they sometimes abduct people right off the planet, and right now there are human beings somewhere right now in a zoo or something, somewhere on some other planet in another galaxy for all we know? Possibly, we just don't know. Or are they doing the same thing to human beings as they're doing to cattle? Could be. We just don't know. And for all we know, maybe the greys and the praying mantises, they have a different kind of agenda than some other visitors. I mean, not all creatures, not all beings that people encounter look like these creatures. There's a lot of different descriptions thrown out there. There's the Nordics, for instance. There's reptilians. A lot of people say that the reptilians are just like the greys, and they're working with or they're being controlled by these mantis beings. We really don't know. It's all speculation. Again, all of it's speculation. But something's going on. They're here, and they are up to something. Anyway, continuing, he writes, I suspect the scout craft can't lift very heavy weights and may have trouble raising a 1,200-pound cow. Perhaps that's the reason the body is dropped as soon as the blood and desired body parts are removed, whereas in the case of humans, the weight of the body is more manageable, so it is taken elsewhere for disposal, which prevents its discovery by human authorities. Yeah, that's one of the aspects, one of the mysteries surrounding cattle mutilations. There are a lot of cases where a cow will be discovered in a pasture, and not only are body parts removed and blood completely drained, but it has broken bones, and there's no footprints anywhere around the carcass, and it's as though it was dropped from a great height. Now, this person had speculated in the past, this anonymous source of mine speculated in the past that maybe the reason that a lot of UFOs are seen hovering around volcanoes is because they're getting rid of the human remains. So that's a possibility, I guess, too. Again, all we could do is speculate, and this could be what's happening. We just don't know. Continuing, he writes, if we could enter a hive, we might find a large number of human remains, and after DNA testing, we might be able to identify them as people who had previously been reported missing. Next, there is the medium-sized vehicle, perhaps 100 feet wide, which I refer to as a cruiser. This is usually manned by some small grays and 1 to 2 of the tall grays, and may also have a mantis on board. These ships are primarily used to abduct humans, which they plan to perform more complex experiments on. The abduction is usually facilitated by neurological paralysis and an alternate application of the same sort of space-bending technology that propels their vehicles. This technology enables them to extract the victim directly through a wall or ceiling of their house or car. It sounds incredible, but as Einstein told us, the fabric of space is distorted by the presence of mass, and apparently there are other ways of doing it as well. Okay, let me just stop there for a second. Now, yeah, I wonder if that's how that being that I know was in my room when I was a kid. I wonder how he got in there. Did he walk through the wall somehow, or did he come through the window? Or did he open the window up and get in there that way? I don't know. Or did he come in through the front door? Who knows? I don't know. I have no idea. But he could have came through the wall. And what was that loud electronic humming sound that I heard? Which, by the way, I keep coming across that. I've been doing some more research. I was reading some more books today, and there was another case I never heard of before where some UFO was hovering over some guy, and it had this loud electronic humming sound, or like a sound like a hive of bees. Another case, you hear it over and over again. So my experience is not that the experience that I had with that sound that I heard is not it's something that has happened to other people. Anyway, continuing. He writes, abductees frequently report reproductive material being taken from them, perhaps to be used to improve the ability of the Greys to function in Earth's environment, or perhaps to create an elite force capable of infiltrating our social and political institutions. Obviously, placing nanotech implants in the bodies of abductees and erasing their memory of the event has some very ominous implications. Okay, I just want to talk about this for a second. The elite force, now that's something that has been suggested by researchers like David M. Jacobs, who hypnotized over 1,000 alleged alien abductees and came to the conclusion that there's a race of beings among us that are half human, half alien, but they look completely human, and they possess the same kind of abilities that these alien beings have, the ability to read your mind, and among other things. And what if they're sprinkled all out throughout the world right now, and they're waiting for instructions for something to occur at some point in the future? Who knows? Or maybe what they're doing too or maybe it's that is true along with other aspects. I mean, it could be that is something that is happening, and other things like maybe they are using our DNA, our human beings in these reproductive experiments. It's some way to improve the Greys so they could exist in Earth's atmosphere better than they were before they arrived. Is that possible too? Anything's possible. Again, the governments, they're not telling us the truth about this because they don't know either. I'm sure this is probably part of it. They don't have all the answers for this, and that's why they're afraid to come forward and tell us the truth, because they just don't know what the hell's going on. And so they keep it a secret instead, and they don't want to. That's why they don't want to say anything. Possibly. Anyway, continuing. He also said about placing nanotech implants in the body. Obviously, placing nanotech implants in the bodies of abductees and erasing their memory of the event has some very ominous implications. Yeah, there have been these devices that have been removed from people. They were examined. People like Dr. Roger Lear was looking at these objects. They have no explanation for them. They exist in people. They're strange. They don't know what they're doing, but they're there. I mean, shouldn't that be considered evidence? I don't know why it's not. It is evidence, though. That's the whole thing. It shows you that there's somehow certain people who claim to have been abducted end up with certain kinds of objects, strange objects inside of them that make no sense. And it seems like when they go to look at these objects, there's no people like Lear pointed out that it's like the body never rejected them. These tried to reject these objects for whatever reason. Like, well, how is that possible? Unless it's some sort of a technology that we just don't understand yet. That's the only explanation, right? Anyway, continuing, he writes, finally, although seldom seen, the largest type of vehicle the aliens utilize is what I call a mothership. I think it's safe to assume that the small scout craft commonly used by the Greys or even the cruisers aren't able to make interstellar journeys. The ones we've recovered contain no food or other provisions, no beds or living areas, etc. Yeah, and a lot of the literature with regard to alien crash recoveries, there's nothing in these objects, no food, nothing. We've never heard anything like that. Continuing, I believe the interstellar voyage was made in one of the larger motherships, and the scout craft and cruisers were transported within it. Now the motherships seem to serve as mobile command posts. When a mass abduction of 10 to 15 people is conducted, a cloaked mothership hovers high above while the small Greys and scout crafts collect the individual victims, then transfer them to the mothership for bulk processing. Using methods such as these, an entire planet can be conquered without firing a shot. Yeah, you've heard a lot of cases like that where people are abducted and they're brought onto a bigger ship. In fact, Travis Walton talked about that. He felt like he walked out of a smaller ship into a larger ship. There was a smaller ship that him and all these other guys, loggers in Arizona back in 1975, witnessed when they were driving home one evening after a hard day's work, and Travis gets out of the truck, goes up to this craft. He gets blasted by some kind of a beam of light. His buddies take off in the pickup truck, but when they go back to find him shortly afterward, he's gone, and so is the craft. And then he's gone for 5 days until he mysteriously shows up. And then when he does show up, he was shocked to find that he was gone for as long as he was. He couldn't believe 5 days went by because he thought that he was only gone for a few hours. He woke up on a table, and there was a handful of these short gray beings with the big heads and these penetrating eyes looking at him. It freaked him out. He said he picked up some object, he threatened him with it, and they just walked out of the room. He walked out of the room, and then next thing you know, seemed like he walked outside of the craft into like a bigger craft. Is that what happened to him? He was gone for 5 days, has no memory of what really happened, right? So is that what happened to him? Sounds like it. Possible. And I've heard other cases like this too. There's other cases where you hear people are brought into some bigger kind of they're taken into a smaller craft first, and then somehow later on they find themselves in some sort of a larger craft. Anyway, continuing. These creatures are inherently devious and have developed many sophisticated techniques for subjugating and controlling their victims. In 2014, a Chilean Navy helicopter captured FLIR video of a UFO which was optically cloaked and saw it emit a large cloud of gas. Could that gas have been some sort of chemical pacification experiment? In 1997, a large mothership passed over Phoenix, Arizona, which was seen by hundreds of people. Those who saw the ship at close range seemed euphoric and stated they got the feeling that the aliens were here to help us. Could that have been yet another pacification experiment, perhaps using neurological methods? The Ariel school encounter is another good example. In 1994, a scout craft landed near a school in Zimbabwe, and several Greys emerged. Over 60 children observed this and said that the Greys telepathically projected images of destruction being caused by our own technology. This was apparently intended as a warning. Now, I just want to point out, it wasn't all 60 kids that had that telepathic message. It was only like 2 or 3 of them that received that message. But still, yeah, that's the question. Was it a warning? Maybe we need this, lay off advancing with our technology, because maybe we'll get to a point where it's going to be unacceptable to these alien beings that are here for purposes unknown. Anyway, continuing, the images were probably projected by a device located within the ship, and the Greys were merely delivery boys. The motive for this stunt isn't hard to guess. Their technology is what gives them power over us, but they see us advancing rapidly, and they're worried we will eventually catch up. Unfortunately, I don't believe we've learned much by examining recovered UFOs. I've never seen anything in the possession of the military that was obviously derived from any sort of alien technology. While I'm sure that such efforts are ongoing, the rumors about it have served to place the UFO issue into a realm of classified defense programs, thus making the secrecy seem reasonable and necessary. That's a good point. Yeah, maybe it does seem that way, right? Maybe we better not talk about this because they're secretly looking at this, and maybe we'd be best just to go along with this obvious ruse. I mean, that's what I'm starting. To me, it's like I mentioned this the other day in a different podcast where it seems like for instance, the Roswell report, case closed, that the Air Force put out back in 1997, talking about which gave us for the first time the dummy explanation, dummies from above. It's so absurd, it's so ridiculous, and doesn't explain anything really. It's almost as though it was written as a, hey, this is our story, and maybe I'm not getting it. Maybe that's the whole thing. Maybe there's some people out there are thinking to themselves, hey, okay, obviously anybody who really reads that book would know that this is absolutely absurd and it doesn't explain anything, and basically it's bogus, right? Anybody who would look at that report would know it. And maybe their Air Force was hoping that maybe people will just go along with it because they're still trying secretly to figure out what's going on behind the scenes. And if we all act stupid, then that will give the Pentagon the time it needs to try to get on top of this situation secretly. Because it's so absurd. That book is so absurd. And anybody who would read that would have to walk away and realize that it's completely stupid and doesn't make any sense. Anyway, continuing. And he says, this continues to be the mindset of many people today, and has had the effect of suppressing public discourse and fostering the idea that extreme military secrecy is in our own best interest. Meanwhile, the far more important question of who these aliens are and what they're actually doing here continues to remain largely unexplored. It's clear the small grays are not the true problem. They seem to have difficulty dealing with unfamiliar situations and are certainly not very skillful pilots. Operator error is probably responsible for most UFO crashes, along with other avoidable blunders, such as running out of fuel. Furthermore, if they fail to return from a mission, no search and rescue operation occurs. Apparently, they are expendable and exist only to perform low-level tasks, while the mantis creatures remain safely within the hive. Now, let me just stop there for a second. There have been cases where, I've heard now, whether they're true or not, we don't know. There was a case I was just talking about recently, something that happened in 1950, where a guy came upon a crashed disc, and he actually went inside it and saw there was a couple of dead alien bodies inside it. And he went back, got some of his friends to go check it out with him. And when they got there, the whole craft was just nothing but a pile of hot ashes, and floating above was 2 flying saucers on a mothership. And there was another story I remember reading where there were people that were working on a recovery, and a ship showed up, and they felt like they felt that the beings wanted them to leave and not try to retrieve this craft. So there's stories out there where that happens, but for the most part, it seems like they don't come back for them, and they don't care. I mean, Roswell is a case like that. I mean, apparently something exploded, over a ranch. A saucer exploded, and then it crashed, and it took a few days, but the Air Force finally found it and recovered it, and we've been living with that since that time. But apparently, their brethren did not come back and try to do something about it before our military officials did something about it. So who knows? But anyway, that does seem to be the case, that for the most part, they don't seem like they care. I mean, it would be like, if you crashed an airplane in the jungle where a primitive tribe lives, right? They're never going to figure out how that thing works, right? It's just not going to happen. It's the same thing with what's going on here. Anyway, continuing. He writes, as stated earlier, greys appear to absorb nutrients directly through their skin. We have reports from abductees that greys were seen floating in tanks of a clear liquid. This liquid is likely refined from the blood they gather, and if the mantis creatures control the nutrient tanks, the greys are therefore completely dependent upon them for survival. Yeah, it seems like as suggested by people like Gary Nolan, that what these beings, what these grays might be, they might be biological robots created to be servants to this higher being, these mantis beings, or maybe they're all part of something else. Maybe the mantis beings are serving something up even higher that we don't even know about. Who knows? We don't know. Again, all it is speculation. I don't think people in the government know what's going on either. Not completely. They probably know some things, but not everything. They know more than we do. Let's put it that way. I'm sure the people in the government, they know more than we do about these things, and they're not sharing that information with us. And obviously, it's because they don't know enough. That's part of it. Anyway, continuing. These mantis creatures are obviously responsible for directing the Greys, so no victory will be complete unless they are also included. The military is working on advanced countermeasures, including robotics, AI, and directed energy weapons. I suspect they will soon propose constructing a series of laser cannons which can provide better air defense than intercepting targets kinetically as we now do. Considering the advanced level of the aliens' technology, it's clear the military will need more time to prepare. So for the moment, it seems all we can do is to hope the military makes the most rapid progress possible, and that we don't happen to be the next unlucky victim who gets abducted in the interim. So there we are. That's, again, this is all speculation about what's going on here. That there are beings among us who are up to no good, and that the military is secretly trying to devise methods to combat these things from completing their agenda, whatever that agenda is. And the rest of the world is just left in the dark, while a lot of the world is actually left in even a darker spot because they have no idea. No idea. A lot of people don't believe it because, we talk about just recently, Wikipedia, all the Wikipedia pages that talks about extraterrestrials and UFOs, they're completely controlled by these skeptics organization, guerrilla skepticism on Wikipedia. I just recently, in the previous 3 episodes, I talked about Roswell, and I believe that I clearly show that the Air Force has lied about this. Their stories about balloons, mogul balloons, and dummies are complete, absolute nonsense. There's way too many witnesses who show us that something else happened there, and if this was to go to a court of law, if Roswell were to go to a court of law, it would be shown the side that would be on the dummy side, they would lose. They would lose based on the testimony that's already out there. There's enough evidence that has amassed to this point now that clearly shows that the story that the Air Force and the government has been telling us about Roswell all these years is nothing but a bunch of lies. But you wouldn't know that, though, if you went to the Wikipedia page that talks about the Roswell incident. It's absolutely terrible, terrible. It's totally fake. They don't have any. They provide, all they do is in there is everything is the debunker side of it. It has nothing on the other side. They don't even mention these books I've been talking about recently by Donald Schmidt and Thomas Carey. Roswell, The Ultimate Cold Case Closed, Witness to Roswell. They don't even mention those books in here. They don't talk about all the witnesses. I mean, there's enough circumstantial evidence at this point that if it went to a court, they would be able to show that the government has been lying about this. There's just no question about it. There's enough people that have given deathbed confessions who saw bodies in addition to wreckage that clearly shows that the government has been lying about this. The whole I'm not going to get into the whole thing again, but the other day when I did the podcast. There's not the last one, but the one before that, where I was talking about the dummies. There's no way that story is real. That was a phony, completely made up story by the Air Force. But yet, that's the official story on Wikipedia. So anybody who has a casual interest in this or any other story about UFOs or extraterrestrials, they're not going to get the whole side. They're going to get only what debunkers tell them. It's unbelievable. In fact, I just want to show an example of what's going on Wikipedia. They talk about the anthropomorphic dummies. I'm going to pull it up on the screen. It says, here's their little section about the anthropomorphic dummies on Wikipedia. It states, the 1947 Roswell accounts did not mention alien bodies. The reports of bodies came decades later. That's right there, that's false right there. I know that just based on the information I was talking about in my previous podcast. No, there were people that talked about bodies, such as Pappy Henderson, the pilot who flew some of those bodies from Roswell to Ohio in July of 1947. That story was out. He actually told his wife in 1982 that he was the pilot. He admitted to it, and he was the one who said that the beings themselves looked like Casper the Friendly Ghost. See, that's the whole thing. This whole Wikipedia story doesn't even get into the version of Roswell in Wikipedia, I should say, the phony version. Doesn't even get into any of the more recent research at all. It doesn't talk about Walter Haut's affidavit, that he signed in 2002 and then was opened several years later after he died, that he was the communications officer there in Roswell in 1947. Doesn't talk about that. Doesn't talk about the fact that that he said he saw the wreckage and the bodies, in addition to all the other witnesses that I talked about. I went over just the other day in my previous podcast. But anyway, let's go through this phony story that you see on Wikipedia. It says here, none of the primary eyewitnesses mentioned bodies. Jesse Marcel denied their presence when asked, and Roswell authors interviewed only 4 people with supposed first-hand knowledge of alien bodies. That's another lie. Roswell authors interviewed only 4 people with supposed first-hand knowledge of alien bodies. It was well over 4 people I've been talking about over the last few podcasts. Well over that. They're going by information from the 80s, early 90s. They didn't update this. They're using old stuff. They're using old stuff. They're not including the updates to this story, to this investigation. See, that's the whole thing. A lot of people forget. People started investigating this in the late 70s. There was only a small little piece of the story, and some of the story turned out to be okay. This like the Barney Barnett story, which I was mentioned in one of those previous podcasts. That turned out to be not connected to Roswell, apparently. Or maybe it was. We really don't know. But that's not part of this the narrative that's out there now. There's a story, and it makes sense now. Like I said, the research is there. It's already completed, and they're not talking about it at all. Like I said, these 2 books that I've been relying on for those podcasts, they're not even they don't mention them here. They're not here. But anyway, continuing, and another thing too, Jesse Marcel denied their presence when asked. He just said Jesse Marcel ever said was he didn't see them. That's what he said when he was asked originally. But there were but there was more about the story that he said he would never talk about. But apparently there were 2 people he did tell about, as I talked about in the previous episode. See, this whole thing, it's a completely one-sided story that doesn't even tell you the truth about what happened, what information is out there on Roswell. They're not giving you the full truth on this. But anyway, let's go through it. It says here, Jesse Marcel denied their presence when asked, and Roswell authors interviewed only 4 people with supposed first-hand knowledge of alien bodies. Again, that's false, based on just what I was just talking about. The claims of alien bodies, made decades later by elderly witnesses, sometimes as deathbed confessions, contradict each other in basic details, such as the location of the crash, the number of extraterrestrials, and the description of the bodies. Again, that's not true. All of those ones I was talking about just recently, there were several witnesses who talked about Hangar 3. At least 4 witnesses I could just think of on the top of my head. At least 4 witnesses were talking about that the bodies were initially brought to Hangar 3, and then they were brought to the base hospital afterward, and then some of the bodies they'd start flying them out to right field from Roswell later on. So again, they did have, this is all phony information, and all the if you look through this article at the end of it, for all the sources, it's all, like, for the most part, predominantly, I would say at least well over 90% of the sources are all from debunkers, people who've written debunking articles and books, people like the late Curtis Peebles, the late Philip Klass, people like that, all people who are just debunkers. But meanwhile, the people who did real research, rather than sitting on their duffs and not really doing an investigation like the people I just mentioned, right? The real people who did the investigations, they're made to look like they didn't really do their homework. They don't mention their other books that came out years later. None of that's here. It's all because it's all bogus. Wikipedia is unreliable. You cannot get reliable information about the extraterrestrial presence or UFOs from Wikipedia, because it's controlled by this guerrilla skepticism on Wikipedia. And in fact, even though I wouldn't be able to edit this page right now. I can't. It's this page here, the Roswell page, is one of the pages that's completely controlled completely controlled by the skeptics, and they won't allow me to even touch it. I can't touch it. I'm not allowed to edit this. Nobody is. Only they are. Only this skeptic group who doesn't consider any of this stuff, doesn't consider any of it, dismisses it all of it, because they don't believe in it. So they want this one-sided story on Wikipedia. You can't trust Wikipedia. You just can't anymore because of what's happening here. Anyway, continuing with this, it says the 1997 Air Force report concluded that the alleged bodies reported by later eyewitnesses came from memories of accidents involving military casualties and memories of the recovery of anthropomorphic dummies. Military programs such as the 1950s Operation High Dive released test dummies from high-altitude balloons above the New Mexico desert. The Air Force concluded that the number of accounts of body retrieval suggested an explanation other than dishonesty, and that the retrieval process for their dummies resembled the body retrieval stories in many aspects. The dummies were transported using stretchers, casket-shaped crates, and sometimes insulation bags that resembled body bags. Descriptions of weapons carriers and a Jeep-like truck that had a bunch of radios matched the Dodge M37 used for 1950s test retrievals. Eyewitnesses described the purported bodies as bald dummies resembling plastic dolls and wearing flight suits. These attributes were consistent with Air Force dummies used in the 1950s. So basically, that's where they left it at. I mean, they're just telling you that's what people mistook. And as I clearly pointed out, there were many witnesses, military witnesses. They're not even talking about them here. Military witnesses that saw them in Roswell in 1947. They weren't dummies. They didn't start dropping the dummies from the sky until the 50s sometime. But yet, that's the story we're getting on Wikipedia. And then later on, it gets in the next section here. Roswell is modern myth and folklore. See, they're painting it as a total myth and folklore. That's what they're trying to make you believe, that it really didn't happen. I'm not going to read this whole thing because all it does is anger me. And then it has a list of books, development of Roswell incident mythology, and it has a list of books. For some reason, the Aztec UFO crash from 1948 is part of this. There was this incident in 1948 that happened that turned out to be the subject of a book in 1950 that was published in 1950. And then a couple years later, it was shown that this Aztec UFO was a hoax. But now there's other researchers who have researched this, who are come up with new information that show that this wasn't a hoax. But they don't even talk about that at all. But for some reason, the Aztec UFO story is part of this mythology of Roswell, and it's called a hoax. And then they talk about the Roswell incident. It was the first book written about it that was published in 1980. Then they call MJ12 it's just a hoax, even though, as I talked about in recent podcasts, there's no evidence that shows that the MJ12 documents, particularly the ones I was focusing on in a series of episodes recently, there's been no evidence that they were hoaxed. There's no evidence. There's more evidence that showed that they were not hoaxed, actually. But in Wikipedia, it's a hoax. And then they talk about UFO crash at Roswell. That was a book published in 1991 by Donald Schmidt and Kevin Randall. And then Crash at Corona, that was a book that was co-written with Stanton Friedman. And that's for Friedman had his idea about the two saucers that crashed into each other, and one of them landed in the plains of San Augustine. A lot of people who studied Roswell don't agree with that. I don't agree with that. And then, of course, the next book they talk about here was the truth about the UFO crash at Roswell. I did talk about that book recently on the show. That was from 1994. It was published, but none of the newer books. They're not getting into it. See, the people that have been investigating Roswell, it took them many years to get all the witnesses that they finally accumulated. There was a lot of people who didn't want to talk about it, and then they finally did. Like one of the people I mentioned in the show recently was Eli Benjamin, who finally talked about it. It was in 2002. I actually made a mistake the other day. I said 2005. It was actually 2002. None of that. They don't get into that stuff. And then they make it look like the only reason that people in Roswell were doing this was to use it as a way to increase tourism to Roswell, New Mexico, which it's totally bogus, but that's where it is. I mean, this whole article is bogus. It's devoid of any kind of the information that I provided, any sort of there's no argument whatsoever about how this the dummy story is completely bogus, how the balloon story itself is completely bogus, how all of the stuff that the Air Force talked about, it takes a completely pro Air Force stance, anti-crash of an extraterrestrial stance, completely makes it look like it's foolish. And you look at all the people, at the end of this, you look at all the references here, like look at Philip Klass, a lot of Class James, the McAndrew. He's the Air Force officer that wrote the Roswell report, Case Closed, from 1997. Curtis Peebles. There's some more stuff from Weaver and McAndrew from their 1994 report. I mean, Carl Flock. He was a debunker. There's just so many. Keith Clore. Look at all the references here. Where you don't see references from the people who did serious research into Roswell at all. You don't see that at all. Instead, you get a lot of comments throughout, right, from people, useless people, useless debunkers who didn't do any real research. Comments from people like Brian Dunning, right? Brian Dunning. You got to be. What a joke! What an absolute joke! That guy is totally useless when it comes to Roswell. He didn't do any kind of investigation. All he did was sits back in his chair, right, and just makes proclamations. But yet, that's the kind of stuff you're going to find in on the Roswell incident page on Wikipedia, thanks to these guerrilla skeptics. And I did check out the people responsible for the edits on here, and it is quite a few of the names that are associated with the guerrilla skeptics. They making it. This is a complete, absolute joke, and it's unbelievable to me that not even these books, this research by people like Carey and Schmidt, that was reported in books like Roswell, The Ultimate Cold Case Closed. There's not even a mention of it in here. Nothing in here about the things that the other witnesses that stepped forward. It's all bogus, folks. It's all bogus. It's very sad. If you want to know the truth about Roswell, get those books and read them. Then you'll know. Check out those other podcasts that I did about this recently. You can't count on this because this is just as bogus as the Air Force reports. You have people from this Wikipedia guerrilla skeptics group just completely changed. Look what they did. They're putting out a complete bogus story just because they don't like it. It's an inconvenient story for them. They don't like facts. If there's any, they don't even like facts, as I talked about in other episodes. If there's any sort of a fact, right, that actually shows that there might be a cover-up or that there might be extraterrestrials, even if it's a fact, they can't have that in there because to them that's that's fringe. We can't go fringe. But what about, there's facts that aren't in this story. This is absolutely absurd. Wikipedia has to do something about this. This is a phony story. Wikipedia is the free encyclopedia, the junk encyclopedia. It's junk now. It's junk. This group has ruined Wikipedia. They've ruined it. They've ruined Wikipedia. Rob Heatherly, as I talked about, he's the one who exposed this, and this is absolute trash. This is garbage. They ruined Wikipedia. Wikipedia is no longer a reliable source. And I hate the fact that sometimes when I talk certain episodes that I put on YouTube, right, I put them on Spotify and YouTube, and I'm getting upset anymore because sometimes they'll put YouTube, if I mention alien abduction, for instance, they'll have context in there and they'll say alien abduction. They'll have a story from Wikipedia about alien abduction. You can't use Wikipedia for context anymore. It's not fair and balanced. It doesn't provide a fair and balanced explanation for alien abduction. It's completely one-sided to the debunker side. We can't have this. That's not the way it's supposed to be. You're supposed to have both sides expressed. Not like this. This is bogus. Like, look at it. If I tried to wanted to edit this page, I can't do it. It says this page is currently semi-protected so that only established registered users can edit it. And it doesn't matter even if I was an established registered user. If I was considered that, it wouldn't matter anyway, because like I showed recently with a different page, I made some slight changes and they went in there and took those slight changes out. I changed fiction to fact, and they went back in and changed that fact to fiction. So there's nothing you can do. There's nothing you can do. They have this completely they have the market cornered on truth, their truth, only their truth, and not the other side of this story, which is completely wrong. And Wikipedia needs to do something about this. This is absurd. It's absurd. This is a travesty to have this one-sided story about Roswell in there. When, as I showed just recently, I made it was very clear in that podcast. There's enough evidence out there that has been compiled by Roswell researchers that shows clearly that there is a cover-up, most certainly, and that there's dummy and weather balloon stories are complete bogus. They're completely bogus. So I just wanted to point that out to people. Anyhow, moving on, one more thing. I just want to talk about the recent Spotify poll. For the episode, What Happened to the Extraterrestrial Survivor of the Roswell UFO Crash, I asked this question. What do you believe is the reason why the Roswell alien who survived the crash ultimately died soon after anyway? So I asked that question, and let's see what the responses were. I received 44 votes so far. There's 27 days left to vote on this. One person, or 2.3%, say it was a post-crash accident. So somebody believes that maybe what happened was maybe the extraterrestrial stumbled and broke its neck afterward. And I don't believe that. Who knows, though? You never know. 3 people, or 6.8%, say self-destruction. Well, I don't know if I go with that one either. That would, I don't know if they were carrying cyanide tablets on them. 4 people, or 9.1%, say the extraterrestrial died of natural causes or old age. 6 people, or 13.6%, say the government killed it. That's possible. It could have been inadvertent. Maybe they were trying to help, but I don't think the government would have deliberately tried to kill the thing. I think they might have tried to pump it for some information. I think that's possible, or that's. But I don't think they would have tried to. I don't think they would have tried to kill it. Advertently. 7 people, or 15.9%, say Earth's atmosphere did them in. Who knows? Possible. Yeah. Why not? 9 people, or 20.5%, say other. They have other ideas on what might have happened to the extraterrestrial. And the majority, 14 people, or 31.8%, say the alien died from its crash injuries. That's what I believe. I think that that's probably what happened. I think that he died from the crash injuries. I believe that if it survived for a few days, it was probably in dire straits. I mean, the rest of its comrades were all dead. And if this story is true, this was multiple people, as I talked about, from many corners of this Roswell story have commented on that one of these beings was still alive. The sheriff, George Wilcox, said one of the beings was still alive. There was multiple different other military personnel that said it was still alive. There was the lieutenant governor of New Mexico at the time, Joe Montoya, who said it was still alive. And of course, there was Black Mac Magruder, who said it was still alive when he saw it, and when it was flown into right field in mid to late July of 1947, when he saw it there and it was still alive. So there were multiple people that said they saw a living being that survived the Roswell crash. It was at least, I would say, at least four people, at least, and beyond, that saw a living one. There were more people who saw dead ones. But anyway, yeah, we need changes at Wikipedia here. I don't know. I mean, that Roswell story needs changing. It needs to be updated. I mean, you can't have this. You gotta be able to be objective, and you gotta have both sides of a story here. The evidence that has been collected by Roswell researchers over the years, including Kevin Randall, Donald Schmidt, and Thomas Carey, right, shows that there's more than likely a cover-up, and more than likely the government's lying. The preponderance of the evidence weighs on the side of the pro UFO extraterrestrial craft crashing side, not the other side, not the balloon dummy people. The preponderance of the evidence shows they don't have anything really on their side. As I laid it all out in those other episodes. If you haven't checked them out, please check them out. But anyway, I also want to say, if you do like what I'm doing here on this show, please give me a thumbs up on YouTube. Please give me a favorable rating on the Spotify app on your phone. I would very much appreciate it. And share it with other people. That would help out. Get more people out there to find this, that are interested in this subject. That would help. So thank you. Anyway, I want to say thank you all for joining me. Until next time.